The Trump administration has officially ended protections for Venezuelans living in the U.S. under temporary protected status, and that puts more than 300,000 people at risk of deportation in just 60 days. The executive director of the Venezuelan American Caucus tells the Miami Herald that some Venezuelans here in the States say they would rather take their own lives than face the horrors of returning to that country. Meanwhile, the White House now says U.S. Marines have started to expand the Migrant Operations Center at Guantanamo Bay. And NBC News has exclusively learned that some of the more than 8,000 immigrants arrested in the past 2 weeks have already been released back into the U.S. NBC's Julia Ainsley broke that story for us. Also with us, NBC's David Noriega. I know, Julia, that you've spoken with 5 different sources who have confirmed catch and release is still ongoing. So tell us more.
Yeah, that's right. Basically, they just don't have the space to put all of these people, Chris. And the data that we've been seeing so publicly put out by ICE on X, and also the pictures that we've seen, those are all of arrests, but we haven't gotten the data on what happens after that. And as we're learning now, some of those migrants are released. When they're released, they're usually put on an alternative to detention monitoring program. That could look like an ankle monitor, for example, where ICE is able to track their location as they proceed through the immigration system. Many of them could still have a day in court to argue their case for asylum or a reason why they should be able to stay in the United States. But by and large, because they're short on detention space and because federal court orders prevent ICE from holding someone indefinitely, they often could be released. And we understand that those who have been released so far are deemed not to pose a threat to public safety. They do prioritize those who have been convicted of serious crimes for detention, Chris.
All right, David, let's talk about the temporary protected status, and with that protection ending, what is the immediate impact on the Venezuelan community today?
So, Chris, even though it's going to take a couple of months for people to start actually losing the status granted to them under temporary protected status, the Venezuelans that I've been speaking to feel a sense of shock and some surprise even. They say they feel like the rug has been pulled out from under them. It's important to remember, Chris, that in many cases, even though we talk a lot about undocumented immigrants, many of the people who've arrived recently, including Venezuelans, are not strictly speaking undocumented in the way that we think of that, as in, living completely in the shadows with no kind of paperwork whatsoever, working in underground economies. Often they have pending asylum claims. They show up to their immigration court hearings. The ones with TPS are here legally under the status granted by TPS. Often they didn't even cross the border illegally between ports of entry. They entered legally, for example, under the CBP-1 app or under parole programs. So a lot of them feel like they didn't break any laws, at least according to what the rules were at the time, that they've been trying to do things according to the laws of the land, that they've been trying to do things properly. And so this change makes them feel a little bit shocked. It makes them feel like they don't completely understand why the new administration is changing things so suddenly for them. Several people in the Venezuelan community in Florida and other places have been pronouncing themselves on this. I want to play you a clip from what a person from the Venezuelan American Caucus said about this earlier today. Take a listen.
We are human beings who work here, who are small business owners. We pay taxes. Our employers pay taxes. TPS holders are people that are living a legal life in the United States. We are here because we got kicked out from our country because for over 20 years there is a cruel dictatorship in Venezuela.
Now, Chris, what the Trump administration and many Republicans say is that temporary protected status specifically has gone far beyond what its intended goal was, which was a short-term temporary status to give to people who cannot go back to their home countries for reasons of disaster, conflict, etc. They say that it's become a sort of de facto permanent status. They've been saying this for years, and this is the beginning of an effort to kind of roll back what that program has become. Chris?
Thank you for that. All right, Julia, we're also seeing today a nationwide protest. They call it a day without immigrants, and some businesses are actually shutting their doors because they want to make a point about the importance of immigrant workers in the U.S. economy. Give us some context. How much of our economy is fueled by immigrants?
It's huge, Chris. According to a 2022 Pew Research study, the American workforce is dependent upon over 22 million immigrants, those who are here legally, and then an additional 8 million who might be here unauthorized. Now, we've reported a lot on that at NBC News. There are people who can get fraudulent documents and go to work. We've been out to small towns that have tried to do things to get employers not to hire those people. But at the end of the day, a lot of times they're filling the jobs that other people don't want to do. And there's certain sectors that are impacted, especially when you talk about migrants, even legal migrants working, especially in healthcare, hospitality, and across those jobs that we've featured here many times, such as slaughterhouses. So we've been into a lot of people in the agricultural sector could be very badly hurt. And so they're doing this day to try to show this is what industry, this is what the hotels, what the restaurants you depend on would look like if immigrants, legal or not, were not here in this country. And the legal ones, I believe, are also protesting because they say there's an enhanced culture of fear since these ICE arrests started.
Julia Ainsley, David Noriega, thank you both. The biggest night in music, the Grammys, was a heartfelt love letter to the city of Los Angeles after last month's devastating wildfires. The opening number, a star-studded cover of Randy Newman's iconic hit, I Love